A billionaire went out for dinner with his son and then did something that no one in that small diner would forget. The neon sign hummed outside. The fryer filled the air with the warm smell of oil and fried bread, and the clatter of plates and low radio chatter made the place feel like an island of noise and light in a gray evening. Ethan sat with his son Ben at a corner table under a flickering lamp, watching Ben methodically move a toy car across the table with the careful concentration of a child who had learned to make his own small worlds. Ethan had impeccable clothes and tired smile lines that hinted at late nights and boardroom decisions, but in that moment, his hands were sticky with ketchup from a shared basket of fries, and his eyes were the eyes of a man whose greatest title was father. The bell above the diner door jingled, and a woman stepped in holding a small girl who smelled faintly of soap and winter. Her hair was pulled into a careless bun, her jacket threadbare at the cuff, and she kept her head down as though she could make the world look through her shoes. She asked the counter for a glass of water in a voice that was flattened by long days. The girl, Lily, watched the plates of other people like a small detective, measuring what she might miss. Ben looked up from his car and asked, "Dad, can we share?" The question landed like a stone in Ethan's chest. A simple request and a sudden verdict. Ethan stood before he thought about it and said, "Of course we can." He waved the woman over and offered her a seat, not with pity, but with the quiet respect of someone who had learned how to treat people. "Sit with us," he said, and his tone was immediate and ordinary, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to make space for another human being. That invitation was the bridge between two lives, and neither family left that night unchanged. You could smell the coffee more strongly as plates were passed, hear the scrape of chairs and the soft, astonished laughter of Lily when Ben pushed a fry toward her. They left the diner with lighter steps and a promise in the air that this encounter would ripple outward. Over the next week, Ethan found himself thinking about the woman and the girl and the way Lily had tucked her toy under her arm as if it were the only steady thing she owned. He learned her name was Maria and that she worked 2 jobs to keep a small apartment where the radiator never seemed to warm the floor enough. He saw the way she folded a paper napkin around a grateful smile and how she refused cash but accepted the occasional meal as a gesture between equals. "I can pay you back," she said. Once, when Ethan offered to pick up groceries. "You do not owe me anything," Ethan said. And for all their different worlds, his words tried to keep her dignity intact. They met at the park the following Sunday, where Ben and Lily raced each other around a swing set that squeaked in the cold. The air smelled of wet leaves, and the park bench was rough under both their hands. "My dad has a car with a boot full of old toys," Ben announced like a proud merchant. "You can pick one." Lily hesitated and then chose a little plastic truck with a faded sticker. "Thank you," she said, and the simplicity of that gratitude made Ethan clamp his jaw so he would not cry in front of the children. Names of people around them began to populate their new map of connection. Marco, the diner manager, smiled in passing and offered to save them a pie. Rosa, the neighbor from Maria's building, lent a sewing kit and gossiped about landlord Mrs. Chen, who insisted on raising the rent to $850 a month. Samira, the teacher at Lily's school, noticed the scuffed shoes and asked quietly if Lily needed supplies. Jorge, a college friend of Ethan's who ran a small community program, offered to interview Maria for part-time work. Olivia, from HR at Ethan's firm, turned out to be his cousin in a casual conversation that changed the course of their lives. Nurse Patel from the clinic gave Maria a note about affordable health care. And Miguel, the mechanic, patch-matched Ethan's generosity with practical advice about a worn-out tire that kept Maria from getting to a second job. Over the next weeks, the small gestures accumulated into habit. Ethan began leaving a bag of groceries on Maria's stoop with a list of easy recipes he had learned from a chef named Daniel who worked at a local shelter. He arranged a carpool so that Maria could take on a reliable shift at a bakery. And he talked to Jorge about a stipend that could cover a month of rent. "You do not have to tell me everything," Maria said one evening as she held a bowl of soup in both hands like a valuable trophy. "I do not want charity." "This is not charity," Ethan said. "This is people helping people." Their conversations grew deeper with the small mercies of shared errands and school pickups. They started meeting on Wednesdays for a simple routine, a plate of warm pasta, the exchange of stories, and the slow stitching together of trust. But the differences in their lives did not stay invisible. One afternoon, Maria saw a news segment on television at a laundromat that showed Ethan delivering a large donation to a civic center. His photo filled the screen, suit and the familiar jawline, and a headline mentioned his company and its influence. The laundromat hummed and the coins rattled, and Maria felt something unnamed tighten in her chest. Later that week, she found herself standing outside Ethan's modern office building to drop off a thank you note, and she noticed people staring at her coat and her worn sneakers. When Ethan opened the door and saw her on the steps, he felt the sudden distance that money can create if people let it. Maria pulled back as if she could shrink into herself to avoid being measured by his wealth. "I do not want you to think I came here to ask for a handout," she said, voice trembling. "I only wanted to say thank you." "I know," Ethan answered softly, but he had not expected the tremor of pride that made her walk away that day. For a few days, their dinners were missed, and Ben noticed the absence of Lily and asked only once with the solemnity of a child, "Is she mad at us?" The silence widened until Maria accepted a job offer at a cafe that required her to work late nights and avoid the Wednesday dinners. Ethan tried to balance his life of meetings and philanthropy with the ordinary ways of being present, and he found himself failing at times. The gap between their worlds became a wound when a social media post of Ethan and other wealthy donors at a charity gala included a photo of Maria in the background. Someone tagged the photo, and insinuations appeared in comment threads that Maria had been at the event for the photo op. Rumors spread, and dignity was at risk. "They think I was using you," Maria told Ethan when she finally confronted him on a rain-soaked bench, the rain smelling of wet soil and old umbrellas. "You think I needed a camera to be seen?" Ethan listened as the city noise blurred into a low hum, feeling his own embarrassment that his attempts to help had been misunderstood. "I never meant for you to feel exposed," he said. "I wanted to be quiet and steady." The conversation was long and honest and full of little confessions. "Sometimes I am proud and sometimes I am afraid," Maria said. "I have given up things because I had to, and I do not want to be pitied." Ethan answered with specifics. "When you walked into the diner that first night, I saw myself as a father, not as a man of money. I wanted my son to see how you looked at the world. I wanted to teach Ben to be human. If I hurt you, I am sorry." That apology led to a tense reconciliation where both acknowledged the fragile balance of help and autonomy. They set boundaries. Ethan agreed to keep support discreet and to offer practical help like a contact at Olivia's office who could consider Maria for a stable administrative position, and a fund that would not be publicized. Maria accepted the offer but insisted on an interview with Olivia rather than a referral without. Merit. The interview was long and real, and Maria spoke of schedules, childcare with Rosa, and her worry about affording the $850 rent. Olivia praised her candor and hired her part-time with a path to full-time. The community around them rallied subtly. Marco arranged extra shifts at the diner where Lily could sometimes bring her homework, and Miguel fixed her bicycle free of charge. Nurse Patel signed Maria up for a sliding payment plan, and Samira arranged for school supplies donated by the class. The tension had taught them to negotiate dignity. The scene of their reconciliation had many lines of conversation where both parents let out the small fears that had nested under polite smiles. "I do not want my daughter to think that money is what saves people," Maria said. "I want her to know how people show up." "Then we will show up the right way," Ethan promised. "We will show up as neighbors and friends." Around their shared table, the children played and learned new rituals of trust. Ben learned to tie his laces more carefully, and Lily learned to accept help without shame. They started a weekend routine that included park time, library visits, and a Sunday sandwich strategy where families cooked together and split recipes. The symbol of the story became a pair of worn sneakers that Lily had, until one day Jorge surprised her with a new pair that fit and shone like a small victory. The sneakers were a repeated image in conversation and memory, as important as the toy truck Ben had given her at the beginning. About 1/3 of the way through this arc, the channel of connection with the audience was invited. If your heart was tightening with what you were watching, you were asked to pause and reflect, and to share. If you felt moved by a small kindness, please write a comment starting with "My gesture was," and tell the community about a time when a simple act changed something for you or someone you know. Your words might inspire others and help choose stories for future videos. After the pause, the story returned to momentum, with Ethan making a careful, discreet plan to help Maria get more stable work and to find a solution for her rent without making it public. He introduced her to Olivia in a professional lunch where Maria and Olivia talked in detail about schedules, deliverables, and training. The lunch smelled of lemon and warm bread, and Miguel happened to pass by and waved from the sidewalk. Maria later worked extra shifts and took a short training course that Olivia helped to arrange, and she began saving a small amount each week. There was a moment of tension where an old landlord notice arrived, and Maria considered taking a loan from an unregulated lender. The memory of that threat produced in Ethan a decision that was both practical and quiet. He offered to cover 1 month of rent while Maria arranged a formal payment plan, and Olivia advocated for a salary that would prevent her from returning to predatory loans. They handled paperwork with care and transparency. The financial procedures were simple and detailed and explained in plain language so Maria could understand the terms and feel empowered. They drafted a short agreement that spelled out the loan terms in numbers and dates and included a schedule for repayment and a clause that prioritized Maria retaining her dignity and choice. The mechanics of the plan gave both of them a sense of control. Months later, the real challenges returned with new faces, like Mrs. Chen, who insisted on inspections and raised the heat of worry in Maria for a night or two. But by then, the support network had hardened into something real. Marco saved extra shifts for Maria. Rosa watched Lily after school 2 afternoons a week. Jorge helped Maria with freelance bookkeeping until Olivia's position became full-time. Ethan learned to sit in the quieter places of Maria's life, to carry groceries without announcing them, to fix a leaking tap with Miguel the mechanic, and to attend Lily's school play without cameras or fanfare. The most dramatic confrontation arrived when an old acquaintance of Ethan's suggested publicity for a good cause that would include Maria as a success story without her consent. When Maria found out, she felt betrayed and packed her things to leave town for safety and privacy. "I cannot be your poster child," she said, as rain dripped from the porch, the smell of wet cardboard sharp. Ethan followed, and they had the rawest conversation they had ever had, where both laid out what they needed and what they feared losing. "I am afraid of losing you," Ethan said. "I am afraid of losing my son to a life that forgot how to be kind without applause," Maria said. They cried, they argued. They decided together that dignity and autonomy would be the compass. Ethan stopped the public plan and called back everyone involved, explaining that help would be private and relationship-based from now on. The reconciliation was slow and tender, and it formed a new routine where the two families met not as giver and recipient, but as partners in a shared neighborhood life. They began to cook dinners together, to celebrate small wins, and to create a schedule where Ethan would mentor and Maria would retain control over her choices. The epilogue that followed showed concrete change and measured progress in time. 1 month later, Maria had completed the onboarding at Olivia's firm and was working 20 hours a week while Rosa helped with childcare 2 afternoons. She had enrolled Lily in an after-school art program recommended by Samira, and had replaced Lily's torn backpack with a new one found with Marco's help. The $850 rent still loomed, but a small emergency fund had been started with contributions from Jorge and some quiet support. 3 months later, Maria had been promoted to a full-time administrative position with benefits and access to a retirement savings plan. She had managed to save $300 toward a security deposit of a better apartment and had learned to budget in small steps. Lily's teacher praised her steady attendance, and Ben and Lily had become a pair of neighborhood fixtures at the park where they now played without the earlier hesitation. Community people like Miguel and Nurse Patel had become regular figures in their lives, offering not just aid but friendship. 6 months later, the transformation had deeper layers. Maria and Ethan shared a modest holiday dinner where the table smelled of roasted vegetables and bread. Maria had signed a lease on a brighter apartment closer to the school, with rent that fit the new budget. Olivia had become a mentor who pushed for Maria to take a night course in office management, and Jorge had helped her file for a small business permit that allowed her to sell baked goods on weekends. Ben and Lily called each other siblings, and their sneakers, once a symbol of need, had become a symbol of movement toward stability. The neighborhood had organized a small block party where people like Marco, Rosa, Samira, Jorge, Olivia, Miguel, Nurse Patel, Mrs. Chen, and Daniel shared stories about how small acts made big differences. The final scenes emphasized that dignity had been preserved, that help had been discreet and steady, and that the love that grew between families was gradual and respectful. In the end, Ethan had not solved everything with money. He had learned how to listen, to keep promises, to step back and let Maria lead when she needed to, and to be a father who taught his son that wealth without humility is hollow. Maria had reclaimed power over her life, finding work, saving, and rebuilding trust in her community. The children had gained siblings in all but blood, and a routine of park Sundays and library visits that would anchor them for years. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to the channel to follow more real encounters that change lives quietly and profoundly. Share in the comments your experience of a small gesture that had a big effect, and begin your message with "My gesture was," so that others can find and feel your story. And remember that sometimes the most speechless moments are not those of grand announcements, but of a simple plate passed across a table and a promise kept. Sometimes the greatest fortune is the choice to make room for another human being.